For problem number 4, we have absolute value of x minus 4 divided by 3 equals 1/2. Now notice, the absolute value is already by itself, and we have equals a positive number. Therefore, we are good to go. Now, since the absolute value it's already by itself, the next step to do is to break it down into our two cases. Case number 1 will be everything inside the absolute value. Again, without the absolute value equals the positive of this number, which is 1/2. My next case will be everything inside the absolute value without the absolute value equals the negative of this number. Now, solve for x in each case. For case number 1, notice that we have fraction and fraction here. Let's get rid of these 3 that is dividing x minus 4. So to get rid of something that is dividing, we do the opposite. So that means that we're going to multiply both sides by 3. So multiply by 3 and multiply by 3 both sides. That means that these 3 and these 3 will cancel. And I'm going to be left with x minus 4 equals, now, in this case we have a fraction multiplied a number. This number 3 has an invisible 1 underneath. So we could actually make it as a fraction. And when we multiply fractions, we multiply straight. Numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. That means I'm going to have 1 multiplied 3, that will give me 3, divided by, and 2 times 1, that will give me 2. So that will give me 3/2. Next step, solve for x. That means move this 4 to the other side in order to leave the x by itself. So that 4 is subtracting. So move it to the other side. We do the opposite, which is add 4 to both sides. So these 4 cancel, and I'm left with x equals. Notice that in this case, the 3/2 and the 4, you cannot add them like regular whole numbers. So let me rewrite them as 3/2 plus 4. Now, the next step is to add a fraction with a number. Now, in order to add fractions, if you might remember, we need to have the same denominator. Denominator of 4 automatically will be 1, because 4 doesn't have a number here, but there is an invisible 1 in there, so we could add it to make it easier for us to add both fractions. Now, my denominator here is 2. My denominator here is 1. My LCD, or my least common denominator, will be 2, because 1 doesn't count as common denominator. That means that I could make this 1 a 2, right? So I could multiply 1 times 2, but if I multiply the denominator, I also need to multiply the top, or the numerator in this case. This one, it's already 2. So we only need to change the 1 into a 2 by multiplying by 2 the denominator and the numerator. So I'm going to have 3/2 plus, and then 4 times 2, that will give me 8, and 1 times 2 is 2. Now that I have the same denominator, all I do is combine the numerators. That means that I'm going to combine 3 and 8, and it's going to be 3 plus 8, and bring down only one of the denominators, which is going to be the 2. So 3 plus 8, that will give me 11/2. One solution will be x equals 11/2. Now let's work on the next case. Again, we're gonna go over the same steps. First thing that we have to do is to get rid of that 3 here in order to leave just x minus 4 by itself in this side. So the 3 is dividing. So to get rid of it, we multiply by 3 both sides. So these three cancels. So I'm left with x minus 4 equals minus 1/2 times 3. Now, in this case, again, very similar to here, we could add the 1 to the 3 and actually multiply. Remember, this is multiplication of fractions. And I'm multiplying a negative number times a positive number. So my answer will be actually negative number. So 1 times 3, that will be 3. And 2 times 1, that will be 2. Remember, in this case, we are multiplying fractions. So when we multiply fractions, we multiply straight. Numerator times numerator, and denominator times the denominator. Only when you multiply. And bring down the x minus 4. Now, next step, solve for x. That means we need to move the 4 to the other side. Okay, so negative 4 and positive 4 cancels. And I'm left with x equals minus 3/2 plus 4. Again, we are trying to combine fractions, not multiplying, meaning add or subtract. Therefore, in order to add or subtract fractions, we need to have the same denominator. The denominator of 4 is automatically 1, but we can make this 1 into a 2 by multiplying by 2, because 1 times 2 gives me 2. But if I multiply the denominator, I also multiply the numerator. That is a rule. If you multiply the denominator, you have to multiply the numerator as well. So I'm going to have x equals negative 3/2 plus 4 times 2, 8, 1 times 2, 2. And then I just combine the numerators, the top numbers, and just leave one of the 2's here. Now I'm going to have negative 3 plus 8. So this is negative, this is positive, meaning we subtract and we keep the sign of the bigger number. So 8 minus 3, that will give me 5. And since a is bigger and is positive, my answer will stay positive. So my two solutions are going to be 11/2 and 5/2, or 11/2 and 5/2.